thank you so much, all of you, each of you, for coming today. As part of the King College of the Arts, we have a prestigious Visiting Scholars Series, as you know, if you're on campus, and we bring people that are outstanding in their field from all areas of the music spectrum. And so it is my great pleasure today to introduce to you Dr. Tracy Richardson. She is the chair of the Music and Theater Department at St. Mary the Woods College in Terre Haute,
yes, very good.
Indiana. It's a hard word for me to say. And has been a board certified music therapist for over 30 years and works in her local area, in the local region, and with clients with mental health issues and in oncology units. Her specialty in our field is that of clinical songwriting, and she'll be sharing some of that with you today. A singer-songwriter in her own right, she is one of my idols. We were talking earlier today about who our favorite artists were, and she is one of my favorite artists by all means. But she's also a member of the Wabash, I say this right, the Wabash Valley National Hall of Fame. Wow, inducted in 2016, and of course a member of the Nashville Music Singer-Songwriter Association.
Yeah.
So yeah, so please welcome Dr. Richardson.
I've never been so honored as when you said that about my songwriting earlier today, so thank you so much. So welcome everybody. I've seen many of you already, either yesterday or today, and some of you I haven't seen before. My name's Tracy, so feel free to come up and ask questions when we're done, or ask questions even during the talk. I would be happy to answer your questions. I'm going to talk a little bit today about my journey as a songwriter, both as a personal songwriter and then as I have moved into the world of music therapy now for 30 years, and using that as something to connect with clients. So we won't be turning around a whole lot, but once in a while I might point this way and point you towards a photo or something like that to get us acclimated. So if you want to just take a little gander of that cornfield, that's where I'm from. So Maureen said, outstanding in my field, and I pictured myself outstanding in the cornfield. So I grew up on an Indiana farm. I don't live too far from there now. I've lived in the Midwest all my life. And as many of you who are music students, I started music lessons when I was young. About 9 years old, I started playing piano. I don't know why I was just drawn to the piano, but if you're a musician, which many of you are, you understand the fact that you feel drawn to an instrument sometimes. And for me, it was the piano. I really wanted to play. So when I was 9, I started piano lessons. My parents were kind enough to get a piano for me, and I started weekly lessons. I found out it works better if you actually practice between those lessons than if you go and try to cram like 5 minutes before you leave for your lesson, and it doesn't work too well that way. So from the time I started those piano lessons, I also just started to make up songs. And living out on a farm, there is a lot to do, but there are also big chunks of time when you don't have something to do. For example, you might be moving the cattle from this field, because they've eaten all of the grass, over to the field that's down the road. And my job as a 10-year-old was to stand down at this field, and when the cows came down the road, I had to shoo them in. That scares me to death now, thinking about that, these 1,200-pound creatures coming towards this 10-year-old. But I stood there, that was my job, but I had a lot of time to kill. And I just started making up little songs about cows and clouds and all kinds of things. And my dad used to tell the story about, he had a little desk right inside the door to our house, and I would come in and he would say, "Hi, Tracy," and I would just run by him and run to the piano because I had some kind of idea that I had to get out on the piano. I don't know if anybody can relate to that. Anybody ever done that with songwriting? You have an idea and you have to get it down before it leaves your head. I also started playing in bands very early, and what I mean by bands, out in the Midwest back in the early 80s, we had a lot of bar bands, and that was just a way for me to improve my songwriting, or my playing skills actually. And you have to be really good at listening and learning by ear, and so I really built my ear by playing in those bands because You don't buy the sheet music to all those songs that you're playing. You simply have to listen, and back in those days it was on a cassette, so I would listen to my cassette and run it back and forth and try to learn the song. So that was really how I started building my ear and building my ability to actually figure out how songs work, as far as verses and choruses and chord progressions. And then I went to college to be a music major. I had no idea what I was going to do as a music major. I just knew that I loved music. I knew that I loved singing and songwriting, and I imagined that someday I might try to make a living at that. But I thought first, I need to go to college, need to study music a little bit. So I did that, and in college I discovered music theory, which I shared a little bit with the students this morning, that really helped me to understand how music works and to make sense of it. And I also discovered music therapy. It was wonderful. Providence is what we call it at St. Mary of the Woods, when two things come together. And so I began to study music therapy and learned that songwriting was one of the ways that we could connect with our clients and help them to express what they need to express. And then as a clinician, when I got out of school, I began to work in behavioral health and actually used songwriting a lot with adolescents and children especially. Some with adults too, but they were a little bit more reluctant to do songwriting, a little bit more of a barrier, not really wanting to go there with feeling vulnerable, whereas children and adolescents were usually a little bit more amenable to that. They were willing to take that risk. And then in the mid-90s, amidst having children and working, I really felt this strong desire to make a CD. It was a dream of mine to make a CD of my own music. I wanted to have that sort of as my legacy, I guess. And so I did that. I recorded that CD in 1997, and it was a wonderful process to go through. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it anyway. There are so many resources out there today to help you if you want to make a CD. It's so much easier now, but back then I really had to figure out a lot of things on my own. So I had that dream, and I made that CD. It took an entire summer to record, and ended up selling all of those copies, all 1,500, I will have you know, over time. And so what I want to give you now is just a little sense of, again, this is where I grew up, and a song that I recorded on that CD that I know that Maureen likes this song, and this was a song written about my home county. So the picture of those covered bridges there, you've probably seen or heard of the movie The Bridges of Madison County, and so everybody thinks that Madison County, Iowa, I think, has all the covered bridges, the most covered bridges. But actually, Park County, Indiana, has the most covered bridges of any county in the United States. And in fact, we have a festival that starts this Friday that runs for 10 days. And 2 million people will come through this little tiny rural county to visit the 30 covered bridges that are there. And they're really beautiful. Those pictures make it look even more beautiful. I don't know why. But, so I'll give you a little taste of my songwriting with this song called In Park County. And the neat thing I just discovered a few minutes ago is that you all have persimmon trees here, and I didn't know that. So there's actually a line in the song about persimmon trees. And my favorite time of the year is this time of the year when the trees are turning and it's so beautiful. So this is an homage to my home called In Park County. sites. I hope it connects people to home. So, as a music therapist, you know, I have all this experience as a songwriter, a personal songwriter, but music therapists use music and use songwriting specifically as one of our ways to connect with people and to help them express themselves. And we're all so individual that it's a perfect way to help people express themselves in a very unique and individual way. So clinical songwriting, my definition for that is it's the use of songwriting in the context of music therapy to address client therapeutic needs. Okay, pretty simple. We're using the songwriting as a way to actually help our clients and help them meet their needs. And we can sort of think about songwriting in a couple of ways, clinical songwriting. We can use songwriting in music therapy, where it's one of the many tools that we pull out of our toolbox, so to speak, right? And we might have a session where we do 4 or 5 or 6 different things, and songwriting is just one of those things that helps the client meet this external goal. So that I think of as songwriting in music therapy. Songwriting as music therapy, I think of that as the songwriting process is the therapy, right? So it can be both things at the same time, but some of the work that we do where we're actually engaging in that process and getting people involved in the process of songwriting, I think of that as songwriting as music therapy because the actual process of doing it meets the therapeutic needs for the client. So I want to give you a couple of examples of things that I've done with clients for clinical songwriting. The first one is one of my favorites, and this was probably about 15 years ago. I have a friend who's a speech therapist in one of the local elementary schools, and she called me and said, I'm going to write a grant with our Arts Association, and I'd really like to know if you would be the music therapist in the grant. And I said, okay, tell me your idea. Basically, she was working with the special needs children in that elementary school, all ages, basically 1st grade through 5th grade. And what she was finding out was happening in some of their combined classroom experiences was that they were developing sort of a hierarchy of who was the most disabled. And they were basically bullying the other children. You know, you're more disabled than I am. Not that they would say those words, but you get the idea. It became sort of a pecking order of, you know, who had the worst problem. And so her idea was to develop some sort of music experience, a music therapy experience, to help them develop some cohesion as a group of children because they can actually help each other deal with what they're dealing with instead of further making them feel different from their peers. And so I said, sure, I'll be a part of that. So she wrote the grant. We wrote it together, but she did most of the work. And we developed an 8-week music therapy program where I would come in and work with those children once a week for 8 weeks. And so what we did was we started out just by playing instruments, and music therapy students and music therapists will relate to this. Sometimes we just need to get people familiar with what they're going to be doing. So we play. We just play. Get them to feel relaxed and comfortable and to know what all the instruments are. And kids love that anyway. They see these new things that they've never gotten to play before, so that's fun for them. Helps them to feel relaxed. And then we started talking, and I would take notes. And I said, let's talk about friends. What are friends? And they would say, oh, friends like to go to the mall together. And I said, okay, so I wrote that down. And they'd say, friends play video games together. I said, that's great. Friends play baseball together. I wrote down everything that they said. There were about 10 children in the group. I wrote down all of their phrases. And then I went home that evening and I thought about what music they might relate to. And at the time, there was a very popular song on the radio that they probably heard 3 or 4 times a day on the school bus. And so I used that tune and sat their words to the music and then brought it back to them. And so I'll give you a little bit of a taste of that. song? Yeah, Follow Me. So that was a song they were very familiar with, so we were able to put that into a song, and I brought that in, and every time I sang the line that one of them had contributed, they were like, oh, I said that, those are my words. And so they learned the song, obviously, and we were able to perform it. They used the instruments that I had introduced them to, and they were able to sing and play that, and then we recorded it, and everybody got a CD of that song. And that was just really special for them. And it took an 8-week process, actually, to go through all of that. But the report I got back from their teachers and from that speech therapist at the end of that was that it actually did help build the cohesion in the group, and that they were not any longer making fun of each other for being more or less disabled, that they really did sort of coalesce as a group. So I think that, you know, music therapy and the songwriting process really helped in that situation. The second example is a boy in the hospital. He was about 12, and I do a little part-time work in a local hospital, mostly on the oncology unit, but once in a while they'll have somebody on a pediatric unit that they want me to go see. And so this particular young boy had a really bad break in his arm, and so he was just there for a few days. But his mom had stepped out. I guess she had been there a lot of the time. And so when I went in to approach him, I said, so do you want to play some instruments today? And he said, sure. So I got my instruments out, we played some instruments. And then I said, you know, I like to do songwriting. Have you ever done that? And he said, no, but I write poems. I said, perfect. So I asked him if he would be willing to actually write a song together that day. And he said, absolutely. And I said, well, what do you want to write a song about? And he said, I really want to write a song about my mom, because she's been here all this time with me. You know, I've been in the hospital and she's been here. And so we wrote a little song in a half an hour, and I'll tell you what happened later. I don't remember what key it was, but I'll just pick one. Mom, I really love you. Mom, you're always there for me. Mom, I couldn't do this without you. Mom, I really love you. Very short, very sweet, but it took us 30 minutes. Mom came in the room and he said, guess what? And she said, what? And he said, we have something for you. And so I actually was on the guitar, so we did that song together, and of course she just cried and cried and cried because she was so honored that he wanted to write a song for her and about her, and the support that she had given him. So I think, you know, obviously that song served a lot of purposes. It actually helped him to say something he wanted to say, and it actually helped the mom to feel reaffirmed for everything she had been doing that moms do. The last example on the slide is I've also done some part-time work over the last probably 10 years in a, I'm just blanking on words, complementary health facility in Terre Haute, Indiana. And so in this facility we have art therapy, we have music therapy, there's yoga, there's acupuncture, there are all kinds of things that happen there, Reiki, and people from the community who want to try those services come in. And actually, when I was doing my counseling internship, I started working with this woman who had been suffering with severe depression and anxiety. And in fact, her depression and anxiety were so bad that she had been referred to do some ECT treatments, which that's pretty severe when people get referred for that. She'd had a couple of suicide attempts. Thankfully, those were not successful. But she had gone through some ECT, and one of the things that happens with ECT is that you can lose some memory from that when that happens. So she was really desperate to find some other way to relieve her depression and anxiety. She'd been to like 5 different psychiatrists many different medications, and some things for her worked and some things didn't. But she was really committed to doing something, to using music therapy actually, and counseling to help overcome her depression and anxiety. And so we worked together a really long time, and probably about 6 years, honestly. And the last probably 3 years of that, we started writing songs together. And I would just bring my guitar and write a song on the spot during the session. And the way it would work was she would tell me what she was going through that week, and then she would say, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to focus on. I don't want to focus on this anxiety. She was anxious about everything. She couldn't even ride in a car for a very long time. It caused so much anxiety in her. And when she became anxious, she became depressed as well. So I don't have examples of songs because we had 3 years worth of basically weekly songs that we did together. But the process was, we sat down and we talked about where she was, where she wanted to be, and then she would bring a tape recorder, or I had the tape recorder, but she would bring a blank tape. And we would record the song for her, and it became a mantra, basically, for her to listen to over the next week, to focus on when she got anxious, when she got depressed. She would take the song that we wrote together, and she would play that for herself, and it would help alleviate that anxiety and the depression. She was also still seeing a psychiatrist, still doing medications, so I was not the only factor, and music therapy and counseling were not the only factors for her, but I really do think it was part of her recovery. And as time went on, in the last year that I saw her, it was like every other week, and then it was every third week, and then every fourth week, and then like once every 2 months. And then finally one day she came in and she said, I don't think I need to do this anymore. And I said, that's great. I told you from the beginning that I want you at some point to be able to fire me. That's the goal. We want you to be able to do this on your own. You shouldn't be in therapy forever. And but she had saved every tape. And we had labeled every tape with the date, and she had always, at the end of every session, I would say, what are we going to call this song? And she would always title the song, and we would write it on the tape. I saw her about 3 months ago in just a local eye doctor office, actually, and she was doing great. And so I was really happy that she had made so much progress. So we talked about this a little this morning, the students that were in that class, is that improvised songwriting on the spot can be really scary, really vulnerable when you're the music therapist. You think, what if I can't remember what I did in this verse, and then I have to remember the same song structure at the end? But you learn to do that. You learn to create little short, memorable motifs that you can then bring back in the music. And you also learn that if you do something differently, it's not the end of the world. And the client doesn't really care as long as they are reflected in that song, as long as you're honoring them, and as long as you're being authentic. Those to me are the most important things. So then, next I'm just going to talk a little bit about my research for my dissertation. When I did my dissertation, again, this was in a counselor education program. That's what my PhD is in. But I was very lucky, I guess, enough to be in a place where they knew I was a music therapist and that I wanted to do a dissertation that had music therapy involved in it. And so the chair of my committee was actually a counselor, but then my other 2 committee members for my dissertation, one was in the psychology department, psychologist, and the other one was the chair of the music department. So I got to have a really interesting dissertation committee. And what I told them I wanted to study was how to use a training program to help music therapists increase their confidence in music therapy, in songwriting. And the reason I started from that point was I had talked to my friends who were music therapists, and because I'm so passionate about songwriting, I thought everybody was, and I thought everybody was using it in their sessions. And what I found was that a lot of music therapists were not using songwriting. And it baffled me, and I would ask them, why don't you use this wonderful tool to help people. And they would say a lot of things like, well, I only have one session with my clients. Or usually it was more like, I just don't feel confident as a songwriter. So I don't feel I don't feel like I can bring a good song to the session. And so I wanted to develop this program that would actually help them increase their confidence. And what I found in actually measuring the level of confidence was that over 50% of music therapists did not use the clinical songwriting in their settings, and mostly because of a lack of confidence. And so I created a 5-hour training program, and the reason it was 5 hours, many of you know, is when you are a music therapist, you have to do continuing education every 5 years. You have to accrue so many hours, 100 hours. And often when you go to a conference, you'll go to continuing music therapy education sessions that are in 5-hour blocks. And so I created a 5-hour training to do at conferences. And what I measured before and after, and then 6 weeks after, was songwriting knowledge, songwriting self-efficacy, and songwriting behavior. Now, self-efficacy is a term that is related to confidence. It comes from Bandura, and I'll just read you a little bit about what he said. Bandura said that perceived self-efficacy is defined as people's beliefs about their capabilities to produce some level of performance that exercises influence over events that affect their lives. So basically, it's our belief in whether we can do something, some specific skill. Bandura said there are 4 ways you can build self-efficacy. You can, and think about this, if you're wanting to learn some kind of new skill, these will probably relate, you can relate to these. One of the ways is you can watch somebody do that skill, right? That's one way to learn something. But another really effective way is to do it, right? You just have to do it to get better at that skill. And so that's what I came up with was in this training was I wanted to teach people, I wanted to give them experiences in a safe environment where they could actually do some songwriting. So during the 5-hour CMTE, we did a lot of knowledge stuff, and then we would break up in small groups and have them write songs together, bring them back, play them for the big group, sort of like we did in class, but we had more time to work with it. And so again, I measured those things before the session, I measured after, and then 6 weeks after I emailed all of the participants with a follow-up to see how they were doing. And what I found was there was a significant increase in all 3 of those things: songwriting knowledge, self-efficacy, and their actual songwriting behavior. They were doing it in clinical sessions, which made me very happy because I felt like now they have a new way of being with their clients. So now I'm going to talk about where I am at this point in my life. In 2012, I started getting a little bit more involved in my own personal songwriting, and I joined the Nashville Songwriters Association International, which anyone can join. And what's great about NSAI, one of the things that's great, is you get free song evaluations as part of your membership every year. You get 12 song evaluations. So I'm doing a plug for NSAI right now. But it's a wonderful tool because if you're wondering, do my songs make sense? Are they commercial? Are they really awful? You can send them off to NSAI and you can ask for an evaluation, okay? So there are 12 of those that you get as part of your membership. There are lots of other perks too, but that's one of the perks that I've really appreciated. And I started going to workshops and conferences about that time in 2012. I've got 3 kids. The youngest one just left for college a few weeks ago. So 2012, 7 years ago, I was starting to feel like, okay, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, where I can start doing some more things for me, things not so much focused on my children. And so I also, during that time, started going to workshops in Nashville that I had heard about. and connecting with other songwriters. And most of them are people that you wouldn't know. They're people like me who are trying to get established as songwriters, trying to just improve our craft. But there are also some people that are involved in these conferences that are really pro songwriters. You might not recognize their names, but you would possibly recognize songs that they've written. So I got really excited about that, and I've continued that work, and I started co-writing. So anybody in here do co-writing in songwriting? Yeah, a few people. So that's a very different process. It's scary a little bit. If you're a songwriter, you can be like, oh, but what if I have an idea that I really like, and when we're co-writing and that person doesn't like it, and it's going to change the whole song? It's a possibility. But it's just like doing anything collaboratively. There's give and take. There's compromise. There are some people you'll click with. There are other people that you won't click with, right? So that's been a really wonderful process. And I do some of the co-writing in person when I'm together with people, and some of it I do via Skype. So one of my favorite co-writers lives in Florida, and we meet every Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And we meet by Skype for 2 hours. I have another co-writing partner in Florida and another one in California, and just technology makes everything easier these days. It makes everything possible. So what I'm trying to do these days is to write every day. I'm trying to really hone my identity as a songwriter. I feel like I've been that all my life, but there are seasons of life where you have to kind of set things aside for yourself, especially if you have a family. And I feel like now it's time to get back into that part of myself, and so I'm writing every day. One of the younger people that I write with, I think he's about 23 or 24, he met with a pro songwriter not too long ago, and the first thing that this pro songwriter said was, "So what'd you write today?" And my friend said, well, it's early in the day, I haven't written anything. And then he said, "You're not a songwriter." And his point was, if you want to be a writer, you write every day, regardless. Even if you're not the grocery list, but if you can just journal 5 minutes in the morning when your brain is still fresh and creative, that's writing. That free writing can wake up that creativity inside you, and that's what we want as songwriters. And so I am writing every day, and I'm doing pre-production for my new CD. So I'm just about ready to do my 3rd CD, and I actually have a book to go along with it. And the theme of both the CD and the book are empowering for women. And so the CD most likely will be called Superwoman Blues, because that's one of the songs, and I'll play that for you in a moment. And the working title of the book is "Who Moved My Cape? Letting Go of Superwoman Expectations." So I think probably some people in here can relate to that. So I'm going to play Superwoman Blues for you. Woke up this morning about 6 a.m. Woke up the kids, took were quite a bit smaller, and I really was going through all of that. So hopefully you can relate in some way to that. So I did Superwoman Blues, and now I'll open it up for questions or comments. Yes.
So I've got a question.
Sure.
Going back to when you were, especially when you were working with a woman who was really depressed for a long period of time.
Yeah.
Did she insert, or did you invite her to insert her ideas about how the song was structured, or the tempo, or the rhythm of it?
I did, and she was very, she didn't want to insert any ideas about that.
She didn't do that.
She wanted me to form the song, but I used her words and phrases. And the way I work when I'm working, especially in an individual session like that, is to check in after maybe a verse and say, is this the direction you want to go? Is this, does it have the sound? Sometimes clients don't have those words like, oh no, I don't want a song in a major key, I want a minor, but they know whether it sounds the way they want or feels the way they want. And so I always gave her those choices, but she left all the musical decisions up to me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yes.
Do you ever get writer's block, and what do you do if you do?
I just keep writing. I try not to write, well, if you've seen The Shining, you know that Jack Nicholson, after 6 months, his wife goes in to look at what he's written, because he's been typing like for months, and she finds this big stack of papers, and it says, all work and no play makes Johnny a dull boy. So I try not to get to that point. But you just keep writing, write about something. I go for walks in the morning, and there's something that's very inspirational about nature to me. And so I like to go out even when it's freezing cold, and I hate cold. I bundle up and I go out and walk in the morning, because just seeing the stars or the moon or the sunrise or whatever it happens to be inspires me. It gives me some kind of idea, and I just come back and I start writing. If I don't have an idea about what to write about, I just write about what I saw when I went for a walk. And a lot of times that just sparks other ideas. I've written lots of songs about the moon and the stars and the sun and the pine trees and that kind of thing. So just try to keep writing it. That's, write about something. Yeah. Yes?
How do you work with a client who's very reluctant to do anything to do with music or song?
Well, I think I might start with where they are. So if they're not wanting to do music, maybe we just do something that's not music first until we build that really strong rapport. And again, there's a lot of situational things. So if you only have one session with a client, you're not going to have time maybe to build the rapport and then get them feeling safe with you and then doing songwriting, for example. But if you have a little bit more time than that, then I would just start with where they are. If they're wanting to just talk and get to know you, that's where I would start. And then gradually start to introduce music in a safe way, maybe just listening together to the songs that they love. Encouraging, maybe you start bringing your guitar and then sing, and see if they want to sing along with you or hum along with you, or tap. Maybe they just want to tap. Whatever you can, we see all kinds of people, and they're at all different places, and they've had all different kinds of experiences, and we just have to really start with where they are. Yes?
Do you usually start with writing the lyrics or with the melodies?
That's like the classic songwriter question, And it's just really different for every songwriter, and it's different for me every time. I think it's different for, just depends on the person. So if I have an idea, it just depends on the song. A lot of times I will start with just an idea of something I want to write about, and then I'll go in and start writing down little words and phrases. One good way, and this actually addresses the writer's block thing too, is to start writing a story or a vignette about what you want to write about. So, I'm wanting to write a song about this lost relationship or whatever. So my first step might be to actually just write the story out. No rhymes, no anything like that, just like what happened. Or I might be taking on a character in the song, And so I might want to write about who is that character and what she'd been through. Actors do this, they write the backstory. the role that my daughter's an actor, and so since she was a little kid, she'd be writing the backstory. I want to know why my character is doing this. And you're kind of doing the same thing in songwriting. So if you get stuck or you don't know where to start, just maybe start by creating a story. And that would give you an idea of kind of where to go. Sometimes I have a melodic idea and I just go to the piano and I'm like, ooh, so what kind of song does that suggest? You know? So something like I had that idea once, and now that's a song. Anybody else? Yes.
So going along with that, like, how do you usually decide which genre would be best for your client? Because sometimes maybe they would want like a sadder tune, but what you think they need is something upbeat. Like, how do you decide what is best? Like, what genre?
What genre? Well, I would always go with what kind of music they connect with, or try to anyway, to the best of my ability. But then I would, again, just always start with where they are. So if they're, whatever they are feeling pulled to do, so if they want to do a slow, melancholy kind of song, maybe that's where we start. And therapeutically, if they need to, maybe move to a different place, if that's not a place that you want them to stay therapeutically, then you might introduce something that has a livelier tempo, or that's in a major key, or something like that. So it's different for every single situation. It's one of those things where you have to have a connection with that client. You have to have rapport with them, and you have to trust your therapeutic instincts and your training, because a lot of times that's where we have to start, especially if we don't have a lot of information about the client. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
How do you overcome the mindset that your songs aren't good enough, or being overly critical of your songs?
I guess if it's clinical songwriting, I don't worry about them being good enough. I worry about, do they meet the client's needs? Do they take that client where they need to go? Do they connect? Does the client connect with this song, and does it reflect what they need for it to reflect? But for my own music, that's just something musicians deal with all the time. You know, people that are professional musicians that tour and record. I read a story about Steve Miller, if anybody knows the Steve Miller band, right, from the 70s. When he recorded in Nashville back in the 70s, he would make everybody in the studio leave. And he said, now teach me how, he told the engineer, teach me how to turn on their buttons so that I can record my voice while you guys are gone. And the engineer's like, why? You're great, you've written hit songs and you've got hit records. And he's like, I don't like to sing in front of people. I feel judged. And I'm like, oh my God. So it happens to everybody. So you just kind of have to deal with it. When you play for an audience, when I play for an audience, I know there are people that aren't going to like my songs. Okay, that's fine. And I hold no grudge, that's just, everybody has different tastes and different preferences. So I have to write music that feels authentic for me. I have tried to write songs according to formulas that are popular in different genres of music, and it just doesn't feel authentic sometimes. So I go back to what feels authentic to me. Maybe it sounds like a 70s song. I don't care. I grew up in the 70s. So, big deal. That's what I love. Yes?
Well, I noticed too that, like, your range, you have a beautiful alto voice, but I noticed that you have your songs, at least the ones you played for us, in a pretty set range.
Yeah.
And that is probably where your voice is most comfortable.
That's where I'm most comfortable.
Comfortable performing. You might try something in the studio, like singing really high or even lower, but not in a performance, right? Probably not.
I've begun to stretch my range, intentionally, and that's something that's not so easy when you get past a certain age. But it can be done if you work on it. So I did a demo back in June, and I did a song that had a 2-octave range, and I did not think I could do it. But the people I was working with said, "You're doing it. You're actually doing it." And I said, yeah, but does it sound good? And they said, it sounds good. So, you know,
Yeah.
I believe them. But yeah, I have my comfortable range, certainly, and it's in that alto area, but I'm really trying to stretch that, and I think as musicians and as music therapists, we've got these tools, these and I hate to use that word tool, but it's what we have to bring to the session, and we have to keep working on that. Yes. Yes.
Also, I commend you for stretching your range.
Oh,
like
thanks.
that's not an easy thing to do.
Right.
Sorry, I wrote my question on here. How did you find a balance of being a mom and working?
Well, any other moms want to take that? It's kind of like you do what you have to do, and I gave this example this morning. You know, sometimes people only see the balls that you're juggling and that you're keeping in the air, and they don't see the ones that you're dropping on the floor. And if you're doing a lot, like there was a certain time when before my son was born, I had girls that were 1 and 4 when I went back to grad school. And I was working full time, went to grad school, and then my son came along, and then I went back and got a PhD, because why not, right? You know, doesn't that make sense? And I'm working full time, and I have a husband who has health issues and has for our entire marriage, and so you just kind of walk through every day and you try to prioritize what needs to come to the forefront today. And I tried as much as possible to put my family first, as you know, but I also relied on my husband to pick up a lot of the slack too, because it's you know, I don't know how people do it without having that partner to help. So I don't have any great answer for that. But I will tell you that during those years, it was very hard to delve into my own songwriting, because there were just trying to keep too many things in the air, and you just kind of have to let the lowest hanging fruit go for a little while. But then, you know, thankfully I'm able to come back to it. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about like recording processes in a clinical setting, and like how / if it's different than you personally recording?
Oh my. Well, the short answer is I don't do a lot of recording of the clinical process other than that one client that I was talking, and that was very simple. Turn on the tape, record, and that was how we did it. And there's a lot of programs now, obviously, GarageBand programs and other programs you can use to record in the session. And I actually use GarageBand and my phone, wherever my phone went, to record when I'm out on those morning walks and I have an idea. I hit the voice memo and I sing it in there so that I won't forget. Because if you have a melodic idea and you don't record it immediately, wait 20 minutes, it's gone. And if it's a great idea, you don't want it to be gone. What if it's Yesterday by the Beatles, right? You know, there's that story about Paul McCartney walking around for like a month, humming that tune, asking people, "What's this song? Man, I woke up with this song in my head, and I don't know what it is. What is this song?" And they kept saying, "Paul, there is no song with that tune. It's your song." And he was on scrambled eggs, da 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 da, scrambled eggs. He just didn't know what it was. But at least he recorded in some way, he recorded that. So I try to record things for myself on voice memos. I do it on GarageBand. In the studio, I haven't been in the studio other than to do that demo for a really long time, but it's just a lot of fun. You know, they've got Pro Tools, and they've got all these great things that can help cover up your little mistakes and things like that. It's not. Sometimes it can make you anxious to be in that situation, be in a studio situation, because again, if you do question, are my songs good enough? Is my voice good enough? That can get in the way. And I'm really trying to learn in this phase of life to just let that stuff go. Because you're never going to please everybody, so why not just try to do what's authentic to you? Yeah. Any other questions? I'll do one closing song, if that's okay. Maureen, do we have time?
Absolutely.
Okay. Drink water. of my kind of 70s influenced songs. I have a few of those. This is called Scratches and Grooves. And your questions. I really enjoyed my visit here, so thanks.
Thanks again, Tracy.
You're very welcome.